So I told you guys I was going to drop more of these, man. And for this video, we're going back, first of all, to Sullivan High School. This is around '05, and there was a couple things that I needed to, really like get off my conscience as far as this video, because I'm not sure if, the students that I'm going to talk about in this video actually know, like the fact that, this was never the way that I intended it to go as far as these incidents, man. And we all have things that we regret in our past. And these two incidents I'm going to talk about in this video are one of the biggest for me. So one of the students I talked to after the incident, and the other one, not really. So those of you guys who haven't seen the previous videos, episodes like this that I upload about, my experience working in the high schools in Chicago, those are back, man, probably a couple months on the channel. But Sullivan High School is a high school on the north side of Chicago in the East Rogers Park neighborhood. And in the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, it was actually, despite the fact that the neighborhood was not one of the worst neighborhoods in the city, Sullivan High School was one of the worst high schools in the city as far as like gang violence and stuff. It was just like the concentration of kids that were there. There were so many different gangs there from, various blocks around that area. And there were also kids coming from other parts of the city. So it was a school where there was a lot of pressure on these kids, especially on the guys, to get involved in nonsense. But there was one kid at the school, and I won't say his name because I don't want to put him on blast. And if I know I have people on the channel, like viewers who went to Sullivan during this time, some of them have, reached out to me and contacted me. If you know the guy who I'm talking about, which you probably are going to know the guy based on what I'm going to say about him, please don't put his name in the comments because I don't want to embarrass any of these guys or anything like that. But all I'll say is this, okay, of all the gangs that were in Sullivan, there was like GD Stones, and then there was like a couple BDs from like other parts of the city, I think. But there were not really too many vice lords or four corner hustlers in the city, in the school. This one particular kid I'm going to talk about was like one of the, if not the only four corner hustler at Sullivan at this particular time. So that right there, everybody who went probably instantly knows who I'm talking about. And he used to color bang. Okay, he used to wear like black and gold, and he used to wear a lot of Lakers stuff. And he used to flag, like he actually used to wear like the gold like flag out of his back pocket. So, anyways, the teachers at Sullivan, they were against this guy. The police, I don't know if the police, how they felt about it, or if they were just like riding with the teachers on this issue, but he was not popular with the teachers. I never saw him really do anything disrespectful, but I would always see him getting kicked out of class and like put out in the hallway and stuff. He was a junior like in '05, I think. And I think he was about 17. So anyways, that's just a little bit, that's really all the details you need to know about that. As far as like gang banging, I don't know what he was really on. I think he was from out west and coming over there, but he was a four corner hustler and he repped it like pretty openly. Like he wasn't one of those kids who was like, if you asked him about it, he would like tell you he can't speak on it. Like he would tell you, what he is and all that kind of stuff. So, and he would tell everybody. So with me, he was always very respectful. I was about 23 years old at the time. This was like one of the first schools where I worked at, after Marshall, and we used to hoop like during free periods and stuff. I mean, he was cool with me. He respected me. He never, did anything, that like to frost me or anything like that. I mean, he was always very cool, quiet, didn't really disrupt anything, just kind of chilled and like kept to himself in my class. I don't know about other teachers. But anyways, one day I'm walking down the hallway, and I hear like screaming coming from one of the ends of the hallway, and there's like a group of kids like gathered around some other kids. Okay. Now, typically, this is, due to a fight. Sullivan, there were fights all the time. Typically, they were gang fights. The fights would be gang-related. So I start going over to, where this screaming is coming from, thinking I'm going to, like, try and break up this fight. So I get there, and I see this four-corner hustler guy up against a wall, like, he was like laughing. He wasn't, clearly was not in any type of distress, wasn't in pain. But there was another kid with like his, like trying to take him down, like with his, arms. He had him wrapped up, like trying to like push him against the wall and trying to like throw him down. But the kid was way smaller than this four corner hustler. And the Four Corner Hustler guy was just kind of like laughing about it, But the other guy was like screaming. The guy who was trying to take him down was like, he was like really, I mean, in a rage. Okay. Now I instantly recognized the guy who was trying to take down the 4CH guy, and he was an African kid. He was an immigrant from, I think, Liberia. It's either like Liberia or Sierra Leone. We had a lot of kids like that at Sullivan. Sullivan was, I would say, about like probably 90% black, like 8% Hispanic, and then like there was like 10 or 15 white kids in the school, and then like a few Asian kids. But it was a lot more diverse than those numbers would suggest, because amongst the black kids, I would say maybe like 60 to 70% of the black kids were American. The rest of them were from like the Caribbean or Africa. And I mean, these were like immigrants, the kids themselves. Okay. Now that, the American black kids and the black kids from, these other countries, for the most part in Sullivan, what I would see is that they got along for the most part, especially the Caribbean kids, like the Jamaican kids, the Haitian kids typically got along with the American black kids, and a lot of times would hang out with them. The African kids didn't really hang out too much with the American black kids. They would kind of hang out by themselves, but like I said, there was no really like real racial tension that I saw as far as that. Or I shouldn't call it racial tension, like ethnic tension between those two groups. They just didn't really hang out with each other. The African kids would hang out by themselves. Like the African kids would be more likely to hang out with like the Asian kids or the white kids than like with the American black kids, at least at Sullivan back then. They were just they had their own circle of friends, didn't really get too involved in the gang stuff. And then the American kids and some of the Caribbean kids got involved in that gang stuff. But, yeah, like I said, there was no real problems though. Okay. But, you would get like teasing here and there, like they used to call it riding back then, like roasting and stuff like that. Little stuff, but nothing too serious. So this African kid was a freshman, and I don't know what had happened or what, had led to this incident, but he was like trying to take down this Four Corner Hustler kid, and the Four Corner Hustler kid was American. Okay. I grabbed the African kid, okay, because the African kid was the only one really being violent at that point, and I'm trying to pull him off of the Four Corner Hustler guy. So the Four Corner Hustler guy is still laughing, and as I'm like trying to pull this African kid off of him, all of a sudden the Four Corner Hustler just decides to start swinging. Okay. Now he's hitting the African kid. He's not hitting me. Okay. But I was like positioning my body in between the two of them to try to get the African kid off of him. So some of his punches were like indirectly hitting me, even though he wasn't aiming for me. You see what I'm saying? So I eventually, ripped the African kid off of him. And by this time, the African kid is like screaming from the punches that this other guy was throwing. And I took the African kid down to the the security office. Told him, this was going down in the hallway, and then I just took off and left. Okay, so the next day, they called me down to the security office, and the police officer that was down there, it was like a female cop. She was like, I don't know what she might have been Puerto Rican. She was like a light-skinned black like female cop, about maybe 40 years old. And she asked me, she said, did so-and-so yesterday hit you? Referring to the Four Corner Hustler. I says, no. I said, no, he didn't hit me. I said, he was fighting with so-and-so, and, I was breaking it up, but no, he didn't hit me. And she says, well, what exactly happened? I said, I saw him wrapping him up. I'm pulling him off of him. And, then he was swinging at him. And, I eventually broke it up and took him down here. She said, well, okay, so did so-and-so's, the Four Corner Hustler guy, she's like, did he ever touch you? Like, did his hands touch you? I said, well, yeah, I mean, he touched me, but that was because I was getting in between, him and the other kid. He wasn't aiming for me. He was aiming for the other kid. She's like, okay, that's all I need to know. Okay. So I'm like, okay. So I took off. It was like a day later. Okay. And, it was like it was a Friday before the weekend, I remember. And I was over on Morse Avenue. Now, Sullivan is over on Bosworth, and then like Morse is it's only like a couple blocks away from Sullivan. So I'm over on Morse, going to the store, and all of a sudden I hear the Four Corner Hustler guy's voice from across the street. He's like, hey, yo, he's like, hey, come here. So I see I go over there. I'm like, hey, what's going on, bro? You know, he's like, hey, did you tell the police that I hit you? I said, no. I said, you know, they called me down to the office to ask about what happened in the hallway, and I told them exactly what happened. I said, you and that dude were into it, and I broke it up. He's like, because they're trying to get me arrested for beating up a teacher. I said, what? Beating up a teacher? I said, man, I didn't tell him nothing like that. I said, I told him exactly what happened. I said, you know, you and that other kid were into it. I just broke it up. You know, I told him, I'm like, they asked me, did you hit me? I said, no. I said, you know, you were hitting the other kid. He's like, well, they're trying to get me locked up for assaulting a teacher. I'm like, now, first of all, I wasn't even a teacher. I was just like an aide. You know what I'm saying? So that part was inaccurate. And then the part about him hitting me, that too was inaccurate. So I'm like, don't worry, man. I'm gonna go down and take care of this on Monday. Okay. So Monday, I go back down to the security office, and I says to the cop, I says, so and so talked to me on Friday, and he said that you know, you guys were saying that he had beaten me up. I said, that's not what happened. I said, you know, he didn't even barely touch me. I said, he was just he was swinging for that other kid. I just got in the way. He's like, oh, it's okay. He's already locked up. I'm like, man, like I got this feeling in like the pit of my stomach that I can't even describe, man, because I'm thinking he was sitting in Cook County Jail at that point for, you know, the fact that I was basically just used like a puppet. It just dawned on me like what a chump I was, that I just got played. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, man, that is so dirty. Like, I felt so like foul after that, man, because I should have known better. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just, like, you got to be on point with these things, you know? And I mean, lesson learned, but I started trying to think, like, is there something I can do to get him out at this point? And so I started asking around, like, you know, what do I do and stuff like that. And there was really, like, at that point, I probably should have done more, but he eventually got out, and like I should have followed up with it after that too. That was one of the things I felt worse about, because you know, try to get, like, find his people, his family, and then find out, you know, about the case so that I could go in there and you know, tell him what really happened. But I never found out exactly what happened with that case. And that was, as I remember, it was like kind of towards the end of the school year. So that was one of that right there. Because I mean, 17, you know, you can be charged, like, I think as an adult in certain cases at that point, and you know, that can affect somebody for the rest of their life, and that's like a serious charge. I mean, you go to college or anything, like, you know, with that charge on your record, and it's going to mess you up. So that right there, that incident, man, was one of like my biggest regrets from working in the schools, period. I mean, it wasn't my intention to do that to him, but just the fact that I let myself like get used like that, man. And then you know, on top of that, just the fact that I didn't follow up with it. Like, I always regretted not following up with it. So then the second incident, this is another one of my big regrets, man. This was about like the same year that happened. And this one involved a girl, okay? This girl's name was and I'm going to say this girl's name because it doesn't involve her doing anything bad. And anybody that knows her, you know, you can hit her up and like let her know about this video. She was a freshman, I think, in 04. So she would have been at Sullivan from about like 04 to 08. This girl's name was Monique, okay? And Monique, I think this year she was either a freshman or a sophomore. So she was younger, but she looked older than she was, okay? So a lot of the guys... Monique was pretty. I'm going to just say that, okay? A lot of the guys at the school were checking for Monique, like even guys like seniors, okay? Because she, like I said, she was like grown. I mean, she clearly finished puberty early, and she was like, I mean, she was grown like that. And the guys were definitely, you know, trying to see what's up with Monique, you know? So there was one day that I was supervising this particular classroom at Sullivan that they used to call in-school suspension. In-school suspension was where kids would get sent for stuff that was like not really serious enough to kick the kid out of school. And a lot of times, really, a lot of the kids that went to in-school suspension didn't even really belong there. Monique really was like a model student. I mean, she was respectful, she was quiet. Whatever happened, she was probably just late to class. A lot of times students that were just late or something like that got sent to in-school. Or, there were times like students would just go to in-school because like something had happened with the class. It wasn't even their fault. Like, the teacher didn't show up or something like that. So they would just send the kids to in-school. So as an aide, I got, basically assigned to supervise in-school a lot, okay? There was a woman named Miss Brunswick, and then there was a guy named Mr. Brooks, who were kind of in charge of it, and they would have me supervise the in-school all the time. So I was supervising in-school this one particular day, and Monique was in there. Again, probably not for anything that she did, because she was like a really good student. But in-school was always packed, okay? There was always like a ton of kids in school, man. Like too many kids even like to fill up the desks. So I was in there, and I was sitting like in like a student desk, but right next to the teacher's desk, like against the back wall. And then just basically the kids were pretty quiet, and I was just sitting there talking to one of the other students that was in the class. Monique was in there sitting at like the opposite end of the in-school room. Okay, so about, I think it was like halfway through the class, this girl walks in, who I've talked about before in videos. And she was, I'm not going to say her name, but she was in a gang, okay? And most of the girls at Sullivan were like, they weren't in gangs, but a lot of them were like gang affiliated, you know what I'm saying? Like they hung out with guys that were in gangs, or, they were from a block that was like in a particular gang, so they would kind of identify with that gang, even though they weren't like active gang bangers. This girl was like, I don't know how deep she was in the streets, but she always used to be, she was like more enthusiastic about the gang thing than like the other girls. And the other girls didn't really like mess with her, but she used to always mess with them. I mean, she could like get on that with any girl, and like the other girl wasn't going to say nothing to her. You know what I'm saying? It was like that. Now, this girl changed a lot later on. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not saying her name. I don't want to put her on blast. Like, she changed a lot, but she was cool. I mean, she had a good personality, man. She was like really friendly. And again, with me, she was really cool. Always respectful with me. She would joke around with me and tease me and stuff like that. But, I mean, it was never anything like mean or disrespectful, okay? And she would always tell the other kids like not to mess with me because like she was like cool with me, So it was good for me to have her in the class, because if anybody else started acting up, she would, like any of the girls started acting up, she would like put them in check so that I wouldn't get in trouble with the principal. So, me and her were cool. So she comes into the class, she had lunch or she had a free period or something like that. I used to let her just like come and hang out in my class, do whatever. So she came into the in-school, she saw that I was in there, and she came in there and she just, sat down in the teacher's desk, like with her backpack still on. And she started talking to some of the other students. So then she sees Monique in the back of the class, okay? And she starts, like, roasting Monique, okay? Like I said, the students, back then they used to call her riding. And she started getting on this with Monique. Now, just to give some background to this, like the culture at Sullivan was one in which the students used to do this to each other literally nonstop all the time. I mean, like roasting, riding, boy, those shoes look like, whatever. I mean, roasting each other's hair, roasting each other's clothes, shoes, just like, it wasn't serious. It was just humorous, and then the other students would normally come back, and then it would go back and forth. I never really saw it turn serious. It was just like students always used to do this like all the time. So typically I would just let it go. A lot of times other kids would just laugh, and it was like, I wouldn't equate it to bullying, because like I said, the students, it was kind of like mutually agreed upon that everybody was just doing this, and it would just go back and forth all class long, like with all the students, man. So it was a normal thing, and the students would do it with me, and I'd do it back. It was just like a lighthearted type thing. But like I said, Monique was more like, she was more like the shy type, So this girl, this gang banger girl, started getting on that with Monique and like roasting her. And, I'm sitting there like just still talking to this other student, not really thinking anything of it, thinking this is just going to go the usual way. Like, Monique's just going to say something back to her, and then Well, Monique wasn't saying nothing back to her. She was just silent, like in the back of the classroom. And a lot of the other kids started laughing at the jokes that this gangbanger girl was saying to Monique. Now, one thing that started happening, though, was that the guys in the class started getting on that, like defending Monique, basically like getting on that with the gangbanger girl on Monique's behalf, like basically roasting the gangbanger girl back. So I'm just letting them do their thing, and the class is, okay, they're laughing at it or whatever. I'm still talking to this other student. So Monique was kind of like looking at me, and there was like no expression whatsoever on her face, but she wasn't saying anything like the whole time. So the guys by this point are roasting the gangbanger girl like heavy, okay? And the gangbanger girls, instead of responding to the guys, she just keeps on going at Monique. So later on, I'm in the hallway, and one of the students that always used to talk to me in class stops me in the hall, and he's like, "Hey man, were you just in school?" I said, "Yeah." What's going on, man? He's like, "Man, Monique is not happy with you." I said, "What happened?" He's like, "Well, she was apparently so and so." He said the gangbanger girl's name. He's like, "Apparently she was like trying to ride while she was in the class, and she was waiting on you to do something about it, and you didn't do nothing." And I'm like, oh man. I'm thinking now, her feelings were probably getting hurt by this, and I should have put, the gangbanger girl in check, which would have been easy for me. And I'm just sitting there letting the guys do their thing without doing my thing, and now I'm like, oh man, now I started to feel terrible because like that, she was taking it like bullying instead of anything, just good, lighthearted or good natured. And that bullying stuff, that gets to people's heads. I know how that affects students like big time. So, I told him, I'm like, man, the other guys were coming back at her for him. And I was just like, not really, thinking anything of it. I was just chilling, talking to this other student. He's like, yeah, she was waiting on you to, step in and put her in check, and you didn't do nothing. I'm like, man, I felt really bad. So I can't remember if I ever tracked Monique down and apologized for that, but I don't think I did. So that right there, because I know how girls are at that age, man. I mean, people in general, like boys too, with their self-image, like being, very delicate and stuff like that. And that kind of thing can really mess somebody up in the head and like make them, do some crazy stuff. So anybody that knows Monique, man, if you know her, and can let her know, she'll know exactly who I am, okay? She'll know exactly who I am. I was a tall, skinny white boy that was in school all the time. She'll remember me, I'm sure. Because people too, incidents like that, they don't forget. Like even into adulthood, like they don't forget stuff like that. I always tell kids, like later, if you say something to somebody, dissing them or making fun of them or whatever, you're going to forget about it like 5 minutes after you said that. But they're going to be thinking about it the rest of the day, And you do that stuff over time, and that adds up, and that really gets to somebody's head, man. So, yeah, if Monique ever sees this video, I mean, she's probably in her 30s now, but I apologize big time. And to anybody else, too, in any situation, not just in school, who sees that going on, like it's always on the person who's in that vicinity to step in and, come to somebody else's defense, no matter who it is, especially if it's a little kid. But two, if it's anybody younger, like I was older at that point, not that much older because I was only like 22, 23, but still older and still in a position of, supervision over them. So I dropped the ball big time, and I felt like, I take a major L for that, for both of those incidents, man. So those are two incidents that I regret among others. But, this video has gone on long enough. Maybe I'll get to those in a future episode, man. But thanks for watching, guys. This is your boy, When You See the Report. I'm out.